distinguished delegates, we now move on this year's high-level event to mark World Day Against Child Labour. I am pleased to hand over to Ms. Femi Oke, journalist and friend of the ILO, who will be moderating this event. Ms. Oke, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sniber. We are halfway through the year for the elimination of child labour, the International Year of the Elimination of Child Labour. We have so much work to do. Welcome to the ILO-UNICEF virtual event for World Day Against Child Labour. My name is Femi Oke. I will be your host for the next 1.5 hours. We have a packed programme, and I know you're going to enjoy this programme. There's a lot of thoughtful thinking to be done, some strategizing to be done, and also some entertainment in the finale. So I'm going to make you stay for the full 90 minutes. Let me tell you what is coming up. We will be looking at the brand new global estimates on child labour, unpacking those statistics. What do they mean? We will also be joined by youth advocates who advocate against child labour through their personal experience. We will see the world through their eyes. Not only will they be speaking, they will be co-hosting with me. They'll be my co-host for this programme. And then the very first Music Against Child Labour competition. We will have the finalists of that competition. We have celebrity judges, and we will play you out with 2 of the winners. Brilliant, brilliant pieces of music. Make some room for you to dance or sway wherever you happen to be around the world. So, delegates, the 109th International Labour Conference, it is so good to have you. Viewers around the world on multiple platforms, really good to have you as well. Let me give you a hashtag, End Child Labour 2021, because when knowledge is dropped in this session, I want you to be able to share it around the world. Our participants today, you will hear them speaking French and English and Spanish, and also some Arabic as well. So if you're on the Zoom platform, you'll see that little globe at the bottom of the platform. Click on it and hopefully you will find your language, your mother tongue, and then you will hear the entire event in the language of your choice. So I would like to get started with Mr. Guy Ryder, Director General of the ILO, and Ms. Henrietta Fore, who is the Executive Director of UNICEF. It is so good to see you, Guy. It is good to see you, Henrietta. I am going to give you 2 tasks, and because you are both hosting this event, I'm going to split the time equally. So, Guy, first of all, I would like you, if you can, to unpack what we've seen as far as the data is concerned with these global estimates of child labour. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Femi. Well, I'm sorry to say that our estimates today bring bad news, and it's particularly bad in the light of the remarkable progress that we've made in previous years when we have been able to reduce child labour by about 1/3. Because now, and it's for the first time in 20 years, we're actually seeing an increase in child labour, and this is even before the impact of the COVID pandemic is taken into account. Our estimates record an additional 8.4 million child labourers, bringing the total to 160 million globally. And that's 63 million girls, 97 million boys, almost 1 in 10 children worldwide. Moreover, almost half of these children, 79 million, are in hazardous work. 70% are working in agriculture, mainly on family farms, and so child labour is 3 times more likely to be found in rural than in urban areas. 20% of child labourers are in services, that includes domestic work, and 10% in manufacturing and industry. In addition, child labour is particularly prevalent in poorly regulated and particularly informal parts of the economy, often beyond the reach of the authorities and of regulation. And looked at more closely from a geographical perspective, we have to see that the picture varies greatly between the different regions. So, positively, child labour continues to decrease in Asia and the Pacific and in Latin America and the Caribbean, but has risen in Africa by 20 million. That's a 27% increase. And 16.6 million of these are to be found in sub-Saharan Africa, where 1 in 4 children are in child labour. These different trends, I think, need to be heard as alarm bells ringing. We simply cannot accept that whilst some regions and some sectors see steady progress, elsewhere, in other places, in other sectors, children are simply being left behind. So what are the solutions? We all already know what works against child labour. We need to ensure that parents have decent work, that they have access to social protection, to help them weather economic and health shocks. This so that their children don't have to work. We need to make sure that children have access to free quality education. Countries need to increase public spending to tackle the root causes of child labour. And we know as well that the pandemic, of course, has severely impacted the world of work, and that brings the very real risk of a further worsening in the numbers that we present today. What we need, finally, then, is renewed cooperation and support for countries most affected by child labour, and that's what's called for by the relevant ILO conventions and also by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Let's remember, the world has already committed to eliminate child labour by 2025. And all of this means every one of us playing our part. And as the lead agency for the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labour, the ILO has promoted the idea of time-bound concrete action pledges. We've made our own action pledge to use our unique tripartite structure to promote accelerated multi-stakeholder engagement to end child labour, and we'll be supporting all 300 or more pledge makers, helping them to connect, to inspire each other and to reach their goals. So in conclusion, I think we need to make these global estimates a trigger for global dialogue and, more importantly, for global action. We have made progress before, so we know we can do it again. And the message today is that we have to do more, we have to do better, and we have to do it now. Thanks.
Thank you, Guy. The global estimates come not just with the data for where the problematic areas are. There are more children than in the past 4 years who are now exposed to child labour, involved in some kind of child labour. So we see the issues, but we also see in the report some of the action and solutions as well. Henrietta Fore, Executive Director of UNICEF, what action do you see that we need to take?
Thank you, Femi. It is great to be with you and great to be with Guy Ryder. It is a very important moment for our world. And as Secretary General Ryder has just said, the global results are alarmingly clear. COVID-19 has made a bad situation even worse. And without significant acceleration and pledges and action, we're not going to reach any of our goals for ending child labor either by 2025 or by 2030. So, Femi, let me turn to 5 areas that we think deserve urgent priority action and investment. First, we need expanded support measures for families, including child benefits and other social protection measures. Regular cash transfers can ease the financial pressure on families and can keep children in school and out of the workplace. They can support a children's learning expenses. They can so often hinders why a child is taken out of school. And second is the need around education. Once children are out of school and enter paid employment, it's very difficult to get them back. We need to get children back into school and keep them there. This should include investments in-school meal programs, which can help ease the financial burden on families, as well as eliminate school fees and other costs for books, for transportation, and for uniforms. We also need to continue our work on connecting every school in the world to the internet, to open digital learning opportunities for every student. And on the legislative side, we urge governments to align the minimum working age with the end of compulsory schooling. So let's keep them in school. Then third, as economies recover from COVID-19, we need to strengthen child protection programming. This should include investments in the social service workforce, such as counselors who can support children in leaving the workforce to go back to school. And it should include workforce inspectors that can ensure that businesses are not engaging in child labor. And fourth, we need to end gender discrimination, something that you and I, Femi, feel passionately about. While boys are overrepresented in child labor, girls are more likely to be out of school and engaged in domestic work, leaving them vulnerable to abuse. We need more outreach and awareness campaigns to shine a light on this underreported issue and change behaviors and attitudes, as well as financial incentives to families to keep children, especially girls, in school. And fifth, finally, we need to ensure that every child is registered at birth. A birth certificate with proof of legal identity and age opens the door to a number of social services and protections. Without it, children are at risk of a range of abuses and violations, including child labor. We urge governments to register all children at birth and link registration to the services, benefits, and protections that can keep children out of the workforce and in school where they belong. Throughout all of this work, we must continue to promote decent work that delivers a fair income for all adult workers and their families, just as Guy Ryder has said. This is especially critical in the informal economy, where children are at particular risk. And we need to also work closely with the private sector to ensure that their operations and their supply chains are free of child labor at every link. So, finally, UNICEF looks forward to working with both public and private sectors alike to move us closer to our goal of eliminating child labor once and for all. And Femi, as Guy said, alarm bells should be ringing. Thank you.
Thank you, Henrietta. Henrietta and Guy will be staying with us for a little while as we head back to a discussion, and I'm going to encourage them to write notes because this is an open discussion. We're not pre-prepared remarks. You can't prepare remarks for global estimates that have gone up rather than gone down when we are trying to eliminate child labor by 2025. So it's an open discussion. It's organic conversation. We're going to be tapping into their brain power. They're going to be making notes. First of all, I want to put a face on some of the statistics that we've been looking at when we've been talking about child labour and eliminating child labour. Who are the children? Where are the children? How many children are impacted? Take a look. $116 million children impacted by child labour, involved in child labour in some way. That is such a huge challenge to eliminate that huge number. I have a number of huge guests who are going to wrestle with that. I want to ask their thoughts about the global estimates that we currently have. I'm going to greet them, say hello to them, and they individually are going to greet you and tell you their job title so you can be suitably impressed. Q Dong Yu, so good to see you. Robert Suarez Santos and Sharon Burrow, really lovely to see you. Q, first of all, I'm just going to get you to introduce yourself. Don't go into a TED Talk. Don't go into our conversation quite yet, but I want people to know who you are and what you do. Q, so good to see you. Introduce yourself to our global audience.
Hi, I'm FLDG, and they look at the policy in the agriculture and food and the rural development. And next to you, Henrietta, and also Ride here, all of you. Thank you.
Very good. I love the meet and greet. It's so nice. Roberto, nice to see you. Introduce yourself to our global audience.
The best way to introduce myself is to say that I represent a big network of business organizations and companies that have been working with values in the ILO and beyond the ILO for already more than 100 years.
Mm-hmm. So good to have you. So
it's unacceptable, yep. And we want to be very much committed. And before this ring, before this bell that has ring, and that has been referred by both Henrietta and Guy Ryder.
Roberto, more from you in a moment. Hello, Sharon. Introduce yourself to our global viewers.
Good afternoon, Femi. Sharon Burrow, General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, and very pleased to be with you to really reaffirm our commitment to acting boldly.
Really good to have you. Q, let's start with you at FAO. This is your expertise that I really want to tap into because the largest number of child laborers are involved in agriculture. When you saw that, first thoughts, and then what do you do about it, Q?
I think the FAO perspective of the new figures released today, I feel first it's a real lot of challenge and a lot of responsibility for all the international community. Since where is the hunger, there is also the increased likelihood of child labor. And almost 690 million people are undernourished in 2019, and the COVID-19 pandemic might be pushed an additional 132 million people into hunger. So you can see the house poverty has increased among small producers, leading to the intolerable paradox of small-scale farmers. And the charge are used to compensate the lack of force in food and agriculture production. We are now, as Rad said already, and we have quite a large number of boys and girls working mostly within their families. They are farmers, toiling to put the food on the table. So we need to look at the all the conditions, situations should be well addressed and protected, together with other partners, private, public, and also UN system like Henrietta, UNICEF. So we have to walk the talk, and also we have to play each part of our role and to end the child labor in 2025 and even beyond. We still have a lot of to do and to improve their conditions.
Thank you, Q. We'll hear more from you in our panel discussion. Let me go to Roberto. Roberto, you mentioned the network that you work with. Sharon, you are going to be representing employees, so we will come to you in a moment. But again, I want to tease out your thoughts with Roberto for when the numbers of child laborers are going up and we're trying to eliminate child laborers. What is the business perspective, Roberto?
The business perspective that I represent is a business of decency. And there are things that are totally unacceptable. And we have been very clear within the ILO, beyond the ILO, in different forums. And this decency means also engagement and means commitment, means but beyond these pledges, what we really want is to push the policy agenda that is needed to eliminate and eradicate the child labor in 20 in line with the SDG goals. That in practical terms also means that we need to do better as business and business organization. And we are firmly committed to that with examples. I mean, since last year, we started an initiative to commit important business organizations in developing economy, which were already doing important activities regarding child labor, but also to help us pushing this policy agenda. That has to do, as Henrietta said, with education, has to do also with ambition on informality. I think one of the main deep roots of this child labor scenario that we have is the fact that we have still more than 60% of the occupied population in the informal sector. We were talking last year about a backlash, and this backlash is here. Sorry, Guy Ryder has just proved it and has shown it. So we need also much more ambition, of course, on the due diligence approach of the companies, seriousness. We'd also stress how important it is right now to have efficient partnerships. There are good examples of how the private and the public sector are working together on educational policies, on health policies, on social care policies, which need to be scaled up and scaled up at global and local level. We are very much committed on that. We are serious, and we want to push this agenda further right now.
Thanks, Roberto. More from you in just a moment. Let me just go to Sharon, representing workers, representing child workers for this conversation, for this big challenge. When you saw the global estimates, what did you think, Sharon? What do you do?
Well, they're devastating. I mean, these figures are devastating, Femi, to see, you know, the optimism of decades of progress, which we were already impatient with, actually now facing a clear stagnation, indeed an increase in child labour, and really you'd have to say almost no progress in agriculture. Some areas maybe, but overall no progress. Then, you know, it's shocking for the world, but for me, I started life, my professional life as a teacher, and totally committed to quality, free, universal public education. And the societal value of quality education is actually being undermined. Henrietta underscored this. Her solutions must be listened to because quality education defines both the children's future, but also the justice of development and inclusion for their parents. So we all must feel some despair because, let me tell you, these figures were taken before COVID-19 became the global crisis. And already we know in Africa, the number of children has increased again. If we don't commit and indeed act now, forget commitment, let's act boldly to make sure that child labour is identified, rooted out, sanctions are taken, but the support is there for parents, then we will rue the day. For us, child labour is like the canary in the coal mine. If children are forced to work, so families can make ends meet, it exposes the systemic failure of our economic model. But we know the solutions. We do know the solutions. If you have a new social contract that's committed to jobs, and jobs, climate-friendly jobs for the parents, committed to decent work with just wages and universal social protection, we can actually make sure children get to experience a childhood. I wanted to just say that this conference is really important because social protection is on the agenda. And governments, unions, employers can commit to not just universal social protection for those countries that can afford it, but global funding, the global funding mechanism to help the poorest countries establish those systems for resilience, for confidence that parents can survive. We also want to see a return to full employment, to decent work, as well as, of course, universal social protection. And that's the core of the Centenary Declaration, which is also on the agenda. So this commitment, critical, mandated due diligence from corporations, as Roberto said, absolutely fundamental, because You can't have corporations with children in their supply chains or governments allowing children in the informal economy. We have the standards, we have the recipes, we know what it will take to build an inclusive and just future. Let's get on with it.
Sharon, sit tight. We'll come back to you for our general discussion. If you were with us from the very beginning of our event, you would have heard Guy Ryder talk about action pledges. You're about to hear a giant action pledge. Listen very carefully to Martin J. Walsh. He's the Secretary of Labour in the United States. Over to you, Secretary Walsh.
The UN has declared 2021 as the International Year of the Elimination of Child Labor. In the Biden-Harris administration and the U.S. Department of Labor, we recognize this as an important moment. It's an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of millions of vulnerable children and families around the world. And it's an obligation to take a stand for human rights. So we pledge to pursue bold action. As we have just heard, an estimated 160 million children are subjected to child labor. 79 million of these children experience the worst forms of abuse, including forced labor and commercial sexual exploitation. Those numbers represent untold trauma, suffering, and lost opportunities. They also show that for the first time in 20 years, global progress against child labor has stalled. The COVID-19 pandemic increased the economic vulnerability of millions of people around the world, and an additional 8.9 million children could end up in child labor by the end of 2022. This is a wake-up call. We made progress on child labor due to decades of collective international action. But that progress can disappear if we're not vigilant. The United States Department of Labor believes that a holistic approach has the best chance of success. We must protect children's rights while meeting the needs of their families, communities, and nation. That means working on every front to address the root causes, including poverty, discrimination, and lack of access to education. The U.S. is committed to working with our international partners, including the ILO and UNICEF. In our pledge for the International Year, the Department of Labor has committed to providing $57 million in 2021 for international action and to eliminate child labor and forced labor. We have also pledged to increase our efforts at home in the United States. We enforce child labor laws in every full investigation that we conduct under the U.S. Fair Labor Standards Act. We make compliance a core component of training in our International Agriculture Enforcement and Education Initiative. And we are joined by the State Department and the U.S. Agency of International Development and the U.S. Trade Representative's Office in this pledge. The task before us is enormous. It requires bold action to build back a better future for our children and families. And it's more important than ever for all countries to recommit to the work of ensuring that no child is exploited or placed in harm's way as a result of child labor. President Biden has said, internationally recognized human rights and fundamental freedoms are each equally the entitlement of all. We are proud to stand with you as we work collectively towards this goal. Together, we can build a world where children are free to learn and achieve their potential. This is what we owe them, and this is our greatest hope for a better tomorrow.
Secretary Martin Walsh, the US Labour Secretary. Kailash Satyarthi has spent many decades trying to eliminate child labour and child exploitation and galvanising the public to do exactly the same. When we now have new global estimates for child labour, he sat down and put a message together for all of us. Kailash, over to you.
My dear sisters and brothers, the new global estimates are shocking to all of us. We had made gradual progress in our fight against child labor till 2016, but this decline is unacceptable. This year, the World Day Against Child Labor is not a day of celebration. It's a wake-up call. It's a day of self-reflection and a day of strengthening our collective resolve. My dear children of the world, I have no justification, and I will not hide behind any excuse. I am sorry. I am sorry I have failed you. We have failed you. Dear friends, I am angry today because 16 million more children between the age of 5 and 11 are pushed into child labor. During the same period, the world has become $10 trillion richer. Most unfortunately, this has happened during the past 4 pre-pandemic years. I'm angry because the world has more resources than ever before and better equipped with knowledge and technology. Yet even more of our children are denied their childhood. I'm angry that there are more child laborers in sub-Saharan African countries than the rest of the world combined. How long will Africa continue to suffer from discrimination and deprivation? How long will her natural resources and her people be exploited and denied their rights? This is unacceptable. We know that our children will suffer more due to pandemic. How are we going to face them when we release the next report in 4 years' time? Dear friends, now is the time to act with utmost compassion. The wealthy nations should come together to create a well-resourced global social protection fund, and the less advanced economies must establish and strengthen their social protection floors. Our children must be given their fair share of education, fair share of health and social protection. We cannot afford to lose an entire generation to our business as usual way of working. We cannot leave our children behind when we move forward. History will never forgive us if we don't act now with utmost vigor and urgency. Dear friends, they are all our children. They are all our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Kailash. I am going to bring back Guy, Henrietta, Hugh, Roberto, and Sharon, and so that we can have a roundtable discussion. Do not let me run this discussion, experts, high-hitting experts. It's a real discussion, not a UN discussion, a real one. I am just so curious about what happened with the trending going up for children who are working. Guy, you start, and then I'm just going to get Sharon, Q, Roberto, Henrietta, just to pick up. And again, don't let me frame this. You frame this because you've got to wrestle with this. Guy, go ahead.
Well, what went wrong, Femi? That's a great question. We took our eye off the ball. We brought down child labour, or we had done, for the first 16 years of this century by 94 million. And now we're going backwards all of a sudden. We took our eye off the ball. We're not giving this issue the importance and the urgency that we should. You know, and I've got two thoughts, if you'll allow me to sort of go in that direction, coming out of the conversation. The first is, there are no excuses. There are no excuses for what's happened. And we should not, I think it's really important, we should not fall into the trap of thinking either that there is some type of justification for child labour. You sometimes hear it. It's an inevitable part of development. It even prepares kids for later working life. We've got to stop that. And secondly, you know, this righteous indignation, which I think Kailash transmitted so superbly just now, that's got to win out over any desperation or resignation that we fear. And if you can do all of that, there's a second thing we have to do, and I'll stop with this. The word that comes to my mind from this conversation is doing this together. So we've got in this meeting the heads of international organisations on labour, on education, on food and agriculture. You've got the private sector of employers, you've got organised labour, you've got civil society, a Nobel laureate no less, and you've got the government of the United States. Who more do you need to make this happen? And I think if we can bring all of this together, and get the right policies in place, you know, we can turn from excuses to maybe patting ourselves on the back a little bit in 4 years' time. I certainly hope so.
Oh, me too. I can see Henrietta strategizing on her notepad. Share the notepad, Henrietta. What are you writing down?
So, Femi, what I've been most concerned about in this report is the increase in numbers for children between the ages of 5 and 11. So when you think about that, it's really, really early to start child labor. And what happens is that you end up in this intergenerational pattern where you think it's all right, what Guy just said, that your children are at work in the fields because you need help in the field. But we've got to be able to get through to parents that education is really important. For a young farmer, as Dong Yu will say, they need to get an education. The world has changed. If we do not help these children, this group of children who are at work around the world, 160 million of them, Femi, if you're talking about, they're going to be left behind. All of their cohorts who are learning things, who are entering a digital world, the new economy of this century, they're going to be left behind. We don't want that to happen. So if we're going to have a equitable playing field in our world, we've got to get the children and their families to value the education, but they've got to have an alternative. So many of these families are just destitute. So what the Secretary of Labor of the United States just said, what Guy just said, if we can put together a coalition to help change this, this is the moment to do it.
I love that all of these big players are all nodding their head. They're all on the same page. Q, you must be devastated to know that more children work in agriculture than any other sector. Why is that persisting, do you think?
Yeah, it's. I agree with Rai and Henrietta and the observation. Because why? For agricultural, food sector, and rural development, there are two reasons. First, historical reason, because all the children and farmers living the rural areas is less developed. They have no, they should improve their livelihood. And when you face a crisis like a pandemic, first we have to offer enough food for them. The food security is the basic human rights. Second, I fully agree with, because another reason, and they are more should be more attention on the education. Without education, you can't cut the root cause of poverty in the rural areas. So, and then you have a generation inherited from one generation to another, still keep, and the modern agricultural food system, you need the innovation, you need a skillful technical training and so on. So you need a basic education first. So I think for agricultural food, it's a long history of reason for the children work at the family, on the farm, no matter is, you look during past 100 years. Huh? So that's a historical. Second, if the policy for education, policy for rural development, you need to improve their infrastructure first and put more resources on the rural education, rural infrastructure. And then the child, they can access even the digital and the broadband and the TV, satellite TV. So it's opened the real window for them to absorb the new, fresh knowledge, and they can follow the progress of the world and not left behind them with education. Before you left off them with food. So I think we need two types of the nutrition. Nutrition of knowledge, nutrition of food. Thank you.
Sharon, you and I noticed exactly the same thing in the stats, and that was these stats look at 4 years of child labour. So it's easy to say, oh, COVID has ruined the progress, as it has for so many different challenges that we have with the SDGs. It's slowed it down, it's stalled it, maybe we've gone back. But these stats are before COVID, and that concerned me. You noted that as well. What else do you want to really hammer home in this discussion?
I want to come back to what Guy said. If we're serious, where's the dialogue with global support for national action? Where's the map and the targets that we need to act on? Now, the ILO does its work, but I must say, and I'm going to ask Roberto to join me in this, that we need to sponsor dialogue in areas that we target. And let's do it with indeed, as we just heard, food security and investment in education. Let's get the intersectionality of what it will take together. Have the dialogue, hold governments and other actors, the business community, ourselves to account. And I think one of the challenges, we've already said universal social protection, it's true, and it has an income dimension. But I know with our sisters in India, in Siwa, we've been trying to work out what's the formula for equating the adequate minimum wage in the Centenary Declaration with an adequate minimum income. So beyond social protection and just survivability, how do we look at rural economies with an eye to what are the elements of living incomes in those economies that give the parents hope?
I'm just looking at the chat, Sharon. Our audience are also suggesting some ideas as well. Sharon, absolutely. You called on Roberto to join with you. Roberto, let me call on you to step forward here. You've been nodding at your co-panelist suggestions, so you're on board. It feels like a lot of responsibility is going to be on your shoulders because a lot of the children are working for businesses, they're working for companies. We have coming up an amazing section in our program where a young man who is now a lawyer worked as a child in a stone quarry, and the company who operates that stone quarry is in this discussion. Extraordinary, right? Who would have thought that would happen? Roberto, your thoughts?
There is no excuse for that.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable. So I don't have anything capacity to say there is something, and Guy also said it very, very clearly. There is no justification for child labor, and we have to be very clear. There is one of the questions, I think it's from Ghana. Someone from Ghana raised one question: what can we do new, different?
Yes, good question.
Bringing all together. We've done that in the past. And Guy said that, and it's great that, and Sharon, it's great that we have this dialogue. It's great that we even try to act together. But for me, the key aspect is to act more efficiently together. Education is essential. I think that working with public institutions and the private sector on the educational field, and I'm not just referring to funding, because it's very often the case that we are looked at fund providers, but sometimes it's expertise, and sometimes what you need is a push for policy change. We have to take much more seriously strong institutions, solid institutions, a culture of compliance, a culture of unacceptable behaviors that need to be addressed. And business, I can tell you, business want that, want strong institutions, want solid and efficient institutions. And if we act all together, and we really take seriously, and I take the call of Sharon. Sharon referred to the food security, all on other areas in which, as in the ILO, we are already working on social protection floors, on social protection, universal social protection access, which is very challenging. At the end of the day, what we need is perhaps more than that, is to find ways in which we can partner in a different manner, an innovative manner, in a much more, may I use this word, aggressive manner. Trying also to avoid the blaming, because that's leading to nowhere. But of course, being serious when violations occur. That's my message. Let's work together in a much more efficient manner. We have doing that. And it's not acceptable also that still we have this huge informality all around the world. And that's the deep root cause of many of the child labor situations we have now.
So Femi, can I just pick up on Roberto's challenge around Ghana? One of the targets we could actually take on is actually fishing in Ghana. Big global companies through the supply chain, we all buy fish and, we have the tools for transparency. The government of Ghana is committed to eliminating child labour. Let's work nationally and globally. Let's do what Roberto says. Let's change the policy settings, look at what we can do and actually make it work. I would say fishing in Ghana, the rare earth mineral mining in the Congo. There are many other areas, but we can take these targets and let's work out what we do step by step by step, monitor it, be transparent about it, and make it happen.
All right. Sharon, Roberto, Hugh, Henrietta, Guy, thank you so much. This is exactly why you have the very high level job titles you have. I feel the intersectionality at play was happening right here. I'm going to send you off to do the important work that you need to do. Thank you so much. We move on with our program. Welcome, everybody. You are watching, if you're just joining us, the UNICEF ILO virtual event to mark the World Day Against Child Labour. The actual day is June the 12th. But to be honest, we need to be marking this day every day because we have so much work to do. I am just going to let our next panelists, our next speakers get set up. As soon as they are ready, technical team, put them on the screen so that I can see them. Aha! This is fantastic. I am so looking forward to this next part of the program. So what we are doing is we are talking about young people. And now we're going to project forward about, we have the global estimates for child labour, and they are not great, okay? More than 160 million children around the world who are involved in child labour. So the numbers trended up. I want to give you just one little glimmer though, one little silver lining, and that is in Asia, the Pacific, and also in Latin America, the number of children working has gone down. So that's one little area or some little regions there to be looking at for what did they do, how did they do it. But in this next section, we are going to be talking to youth advocates, and those youth advocates are going to tell us about their experiences, why they had those experiences, and then they are going to be co-hosting with me, which I'm very delighted to have some help. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm just about to say hello to them. They will greet you and then we will move on. Let me just tell you, if you're on the Zoom platform, some of this conversation you will hear in French or Spanish or Arabic. Use the little globe at the bottom of your dashboard if you are on Zoom for interpretation. Raphael Dennis, Amala, Andrea Val Villegas, and Raphael Al-Khaled. So nice to see you. I'm going to get you to introduce yourself to our audience. Raphael, your introduction, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Femi. My name is Raphael Dennis. I'm a UNICEF youth advocate from Tanzania and a youth coordinator at Citizens for Change East Africa. I am super passionate with creating safer spaces for my peers and children so that we could all live a life free from violence. So I am excited to be part of today's session with such high-profile people and fellow youth advocates.
Mm-hmm. And Raphael, don't tell the others, but you four are the VIPs in this session. Amma, nice to see you. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Femi. Namaste, everyone. My name is Amar Lal. I'm 24 years old from India. I'm a child rights advocate, and I'm also the youth advocate. And I'm really excited for this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Andrea, please introduce yourself to our global audience.
Thank you, Femi. I'm Andrea. I'm 25 years old. I'm a youth activist for child rights and also a political scientist from Peru.
Good to have you. And Rahaf, introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are.
السلام أنا رافع الخالد عمري 16 سنة تقريبا أنا من سوريا من
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rahaf Al-Khalid. I'm 16. I'm living in Lebanon right now, but I actually come from Aleppo in Syria, and I'm an activist for children's rights in Lebanon and throughout the world.
Very welcome to you, Rahaf. Let's start with Raphael, first of all. Raphael, I would love you to explain some of your story, because I was saying a little bit earlier in our program that we have youth advocates who are very closely connected to child labor in their experience, their work, their advocacy. What is your story?
Thank you, Femi. So the story of my advocacy for ending violence against children, and particularly against child labor, started with a pain of losing committed and ambitious school friends who will drop out from school at a very young age and go out to work at the city market and homes of other people so as to support their family's economy. Others will also drop out from school and not want to come to school anymore because of being threatened by corporal punishment at school or being bullied by other friends at school. So at the age of 11, I decided to step up and start changing the situation. I joined the junior council in my country and started voicing out for my peers through local campaigns that aim at keeping our schools and communities safe. Today, as an alumni of Junior Council, I support UNICEF Tanzania and Citizens for Change East Africa to train Junior Council leaders from 7 regions across our country. And we aim that these Junior Council leaders could champion school safety movement in their areas. So working with these amazing young leaders have shown me that safer schools the safer the schools are, the less likely children are to drop out and get exposed to most forms of child labor. I've also learned that children themselves know what works to prevent child labor and should be meaningfully engaged in the movement to end child labor and not only treated as beneficiaries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raphael. Giselle Aranapi is the Minister of Labour for Madagascar. She's right there on the screen. I am handing over my hosting duties to you, Raphael. Go ahead and chat to the Minister.
Thank you so much. So I know that Madagascar is committed to end child labor as an Alliance 8.7 Pathfinder country and a 2021 pledge maker. So I would like to know what are the measures that the government is taking to prevent child labor. How are you engaging young people into that process? And if you have any message to other governments so as to inspire action.
Merci. Merci, Femi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Femi. Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm delighted to be here for this discussion, and thank you, Raphael, for your questions. I really am very touched by your activism and all that you do, Raphael, in seeking to protect children's rights and fight against child labour. I'm very impressed. I'd also like to pay tribute to the Director General of the ILO and indeed to the ILO in general. There's a very impressive team in ILO working on child labour issues, and I would like to thank the ILO for having once again given us an opportunity here to discuss this issue, the issue of how best to fight against the global scourge that is child labour. I'd like to start by saying that in the context of our work within the Alliance to combat child labour, we do a great deal. But even before we joined the Alliance, we were working to fight against child labour in Madagascar. We started doing that back in 1998 when the government undertook a number of initiatives to combat child labour. For instance, we ratified a number of conventions like 58 and also 182. And these are conventions on minimum age and on a prohibition of the worst forms of child labour. So by becoming parties to those conventions, we signalled our willingness to do something about this. We also recognised that children's rights had to be respected within our country's legislation, within the Labour Code, for instance, and within other important legislative texts. For instance, governing laws for the social sector in Madagascar. As well as that, we approved and implemented a national action plan to combat child labour. And this was a plan going from 2004 to 2019. Recently, we've also established national and regional committees that are responsible for coordinating all of the work that is done to combat child labour in Madagascar. However, since we have joined the alliance, we really feel that we've become part of a big family. So despite all that we've done before, we now feel we're really stronger than ever, working in technical and financial partnership with backers and with UN agencies like UNICEF, also the ILO. And this means a great deal to us, and it's allowed us to do even more in rolling out a number of important projects. For instance, we had a project that was intended to support those who were seeking to combat child labour in Madagascar in particular sectors, like in agriculture, for instance, and we got support for that. Let me emphasise that we have a lot of people working in that sector in Madagascar who are children, but we have been able in recent years, we just started this actually last year, to work with our partners to combat child labour in agriculture and also now in mining, another very important sector where a lot of children are employed. And we've been able to do a lot through these kind of partnership projects, things that we couldn't have done on our own. So we're very pleased to be part of this alliance. And when it comes to mining, we are particularly concerned with the situation in Nika, the south part of our island, the island of Madagascar, and that's why we have to do more in working with others to show people that getting children out of work in these terrible conditions of the mines and getting them into education is the best thing not only for them but for our country. And we are seeking to do that. One important question is, how can young people themselves be involved in the combat against child labour? It's not something that can be imposed on them. It's something that they have to be involved in. I know, Raphael, you have been very much involved in this yourself, because young people have to be those who are involved in fighting child labour. We need them because they know better than anyone else what child labour means and what the cost of it is for them. They have experience that they can share with others, and that's very valuable to all of us. So we need to ensure that we can get a contribution from young people to make people more aware of what this is, what it really represents, child labour. And we need to think about how we can really involve young people as active partners in this. We have, for instance, in Madagascar, a project that's intended, this is more for the north of the island this time, to combat violence, domestic violence and other forms of violence, and to consolidate peace and social cohesion in that part of Madagascar. Again, we involve children. And we cooperate with a number of bodies, including, for instance, scouting organisations. It's very good to be in touch with people like Scouts because they know the young people at community level. They know children and they can really work with them. And right now, when we're living with COVID, it's more important than ever to have that kind of contact and through young people's associations to really involve young people in what is done, because they can't simply be in a situation where things are done about them but without their own participation. They need to be on board as we take forward all of these projects. So perhaps, having said all that, I'll now come back to the actual question that I was asked. What was the message that I would like to get over? I know that I was asked that question.
You to answer the question in one sentence because we want our other young people to be able to take part in this conversation. So one sentence answer in reply to Raphael. Thank you.
Yes, fine.
Donc,
so, can you hear me? Yes.
Up. And please respond to Raphael. If this was Raphael, if you were really emceeing, and we had more time, I would have asked you to press the minister. I haven't heard my answer quite yet. Minister, we need to do that in one sentence.
So I'm saying that in what we do, we need to involve as broad a range of actors as possible, everyone who's involved in combating child labour. But first and foremost, we need to involve young people themselves. That's my key message. We do need to get as many people as possible involved. Yes, teachers. Yes, those involved in education. Yes, those at government level. But first and foremost, young people themselves. And we need to hear what they have to say.
I thank you, Raphael. I thank you. I wish we had more time, but we have to move on. So many stories to get to. Amar, it is so good to have you here with us. You have a remarkable backstory that takes you from a youngster, a kid, working in a stone quarry, and now you are a lawyer. Tell us more.
Thank you, Femi. I was born as an bondage. I used to break the stones and putting those stones into trucks. My life was at risk every single day. I had no right to see the dreams in my life at that moment. I was rescued by Mr. Kailas Satyarthiji, who brought me in his rehabilitation center, Balasram, which is ideal for all those children who are like me. Finally, I got an opportunity to study and hold a pen so I can see my dreams, what I can do in my life. At the age of 8, I took a decision that I would become a lawyer and I would commit my life to changing the lives of other children. And that's what I am doing today. Every single day, I'm standing in a courts and fighting for those children who are still exploiting by someone. Still, 160 million children are engaged in child labor. It's a huge, huge number. The children cannot wait. They can't wait any single second. For this, we need an action. I think action is more important than dialogue. The execution is the most important thing. So today we all here together and pledging that we will end child labor. I think our action need with more focus so we can save every single child. Every child matters. Thank you so much.
Amar, thank you. I want to bring in Martin Coffey, the Chief Executive of Marshall's PLC. Martin, I misspoke earlier and I do apologise. I said that Marshall owns stone quarries in India, but you actually source the stone. You do not own them. Having issued that live correction, I am going to hand over to Amar. Amar, what do you want to ask Martin?
Okay, Mr. Coffey. Marshall stone sources stone from Rajasthan, where I grew up, where many children are still engaged in child labor. Mr. Coffey, can you tell me in your view why this progress is so slow and how companies like Marshall's can help accelerate action to end child labor in this sector, please?
Okay, well, thank you, Emma. And first of all, thank you for sharing your remarkable story. I think the fact that you are here today, as well as Kailash, who was involved in obviously your freedom, just shows what can be achieved through education. I think particularly inspiring. As you say, for Marshalls, we've been involved for 16 years in Rajasthan. And in that time, we've come across poverty, bonded labor, lack of social protection, poor education. And we've been met throughout that period with sweeping denials, both in India, in the UK and in Europe, that this even existed, that child labour was there. Marshalls has managed to eradicate child labour from its first and second tier supply chains. How have we done that? We've worked with local suppliers on long-term contracts, with clear deliverables, which include no child labour. It's based on ethical trading initiatives, human rights and ethical audits. We've commissioned research with the UN, NGOs, and also governments. It is important to walk the supply chain, which we've done. But as you say, I mean, child labour is still in this sector, there is no doubt. And the sector has to acknowledge it, in my view, to actually solve the problem. Businesses need to not only focus on their own supply chain. This is not one factory or one quarry. It's actually a sector. So I think people have to recognise that. The sector needs to come together, needs to drive up standards. From a worker's point of view, it needs to eradicate the child labour, working on human rights. And in my opinion, it needs locally more legislation. How can companies like Marshalls do more? We must, at the end, seek out and find where child labour exists, push for mandatory human rights. We can use technology, in my view, to advance supply chain mapping to understand exactly what part of the process people are involved in, push for clarity on the trafficking of children, and engage with expert organisations. A company on its own can't do this. It needs to work together to get the right help for children. We also need to press governments for support in the local area and also the area where the products are sold, and come together. But business leaders do need to speak out against, obviously, child labour, and that is obviously what we're all talking about today. It is about child labour. And I think one of the big explanations in using your own story, this is not just about child labour where people work with their families, which is what I think some people think it is. You know, people are born into bonded labour. People are trafficked to work in hazardous environments. And I think once that can start to become acknowledged, we can go some way to perhaps solving some of the problems. So the companies, big or small, in my view, have to work together. There are extremely effective ILO child labour platforms to work through. So it's not a company's voice, it's actually the whole sector. Because as we've heard today, which is obviously very, very negative, is through the pandemic, it's actually getting worse. And as everyone has said today, the numbers are probably even worse than those being reported. So to change this, I think we have to change direction. We have to multiply our efforts. I will certainly continue to demand the best out of our organisation and suppliers. Choices made in the UK can have a dramatic effect on the lives of children in other parts of the world, as you know yourself only too well, Emma. So we've got to do this right throughout the sector and understanding. And lastly, it's an offer, Emma, to yourself. I'd certainly like to invite you to actually join with us and work and use your experience to help us deliver our international pledge and eradicate child labour from this whole sector. Thank you.
Martin, Amma, this is a connection that we have to make. We have the Zoom chat. You can direct message each other and make sure that that connection happens. This is a remarkable story. If you would like to find out more about the ILO's labour platform, that's Marshalls PLC, is part of that platform. Just put a little note in the Zoom chat and one of our team from the ILO will make sure you have that information. Amma, Martin, I wish we had more time, but thank you so much. Hola, Andrea, nice to see you. You are a child advocate or a young person's advocate for against child labour. And I really want to hear how you do that, what you're doing, your current projects. Tell us a part of your story.
Thank you, Femi. Mi madre de educación colegio estatal. La importancia.
I have understood how important development is, and I've understood this from my early childhood. Often, children are extremely tired because they have to work so hard and they have to contribute to the family economy. So we want for them to be able to enjoy the same standards as other children who go to school. It is very difficult for children who are doing work at home. And in these particular cases, the state is only able to offer them the most basic level of education. And it can be that they don't have their basic needs covered, including, for example, healthcare and food. And we've had a number of campaigns that have helped to make things better in Peru, and we've achieved some social impact, and this has led to some success stories. Many countries in our region have also engaged in campaigns to combat child labor. However, with the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, this has increased the risk for children, and therefore it is not possible to ensure the welfare of our children if we don't have sufficient income for each family. So how can it be that the authorities can leave people so vulnerable? Because children are our future, and we want for there to be development. Young people and others, and young people's advocates, are looking at statistics on child labor, and we are collecting information on this issue. Therefore, it is important also that we work in close collaboration with the education sector. It's very important that there be information and awareness-raising campaigns with young people. And it's very important that states allocate a sufficient budget to combating child labor. And we also need to collect the statistics on the results of these programs in order to ensure that there is full development for children. Thank you very much.
Andrea, let me introduce you to Susana Santomingo, International Affairs Advisor, General Confederation of Labor in Argentina. Susana, thank you so much for joining us. Andrea, over to you.
Hola, Susana. Las nuevas estimaciones mundiales.
Well, new global estimates indicate that we are far from the objectives set for 2020 in terms of combating child labor, and COVID-19 and the pandemic has made the situation worse. So what do you think can be done to combat child labor further and to really put it on the official agenda? Thank you very much for your question. And I'd like to say that I find it very encouraging that there are people like you who are engaged in this fight. What we are doing is we are stepping up all of the work we've been doing for more than 25 years now in this area. We have a number of strategies in place and policies because child labor is a political issue. And therefore, we are striving to implement strategies, and we're trying to work through social dialogue, and we are doing all of this in order to ensure that our public policies might be effective. This is to provide a framework so that it can help young people. We want for politicians to really review this situation, and we want for young people to understand that politicians are behind them. Therefore, yes, the figures are very striking, and therefore we are looking at the statistics, and at a trade union level we are doing a lot of work, and we are working to set up social alliances, partnerships, so that we can really join forces. And here we are working particularly at a local level in the interest of educating trade union leaders at a local level. This we feel is something that is making it possible for us in Argentina. For instance, we see at a regional level, we are more aware of what is happening in the different sectors. Now, there is an issue, as we see it, which is closely linked to social dialogue. We want to have concrete proposals about what we can do. We very much value all of the participation that we're getting at a regional level, and we've got people from throughout the Latin American and Caribbean region addressing the issue of child labor, and we feel it's very important that we get all of this regional participation. Furthermore, we believe that the work that we're doing can be replicated on other continents as well, in Latin America and in the Caribbean region. This is a very important issue for us. And we do understand that in every crisis there is also a silver lining, there's an opportunity, and thus we've got a golden opportunity to seize now in order to bring about change so that we can relaunch our economy and we can find a way out of this pandemic, and we can really address vulnerability, because our society is all the more vulnerable, and this includes children and young people. And this is what we are asking, therefore, is that action is taken now. We know that we've got people listening who really have the fate of young people in their hands. Therefore, we need political will, political decisions to be taken, which will really address the situation. And this includes developed countries, more developed countries, because it is important also to really revisit all of the principles of capitalism, because this is relevant as well, and this leads us to these very difficult situations. Now, it's not just a health crisis that we're talking about now. This crisis is much more wide-reaching than that. And I have to say that I am very moved in listening to you, Andrea, and I am delighted that you are participating, and I'm delighted with all the work that you are doing and all of your efforts. Therefore, my message would be, I want for there to be faith in our politicians so that there might be the right political decisions taken. And I'd like to thank you very much for your question.
Susanna, thank you. Andrea, thank you. Our final youth advocate is 16 years old, Rahaf. It is so great to have you, your story of how you were a former child worker, and now I believe the phrase you said, the greatest youth advocate against child labour in the world, when we were talking earlier. It is so great to have you. What is your story that you want to share with us today?
My story started in 2012. Because of the war in Syria, we had to move out to Lebanon. It was a very difficult economic situation at that time, so I had to work in agriculture and farming. After a while, I heard that there is one NGO that is operating in my area in terms of child protection. So my daily turn was in the morning, so I had to work in the morning, and then I decided in the afternoon to start working. After a while, after a year, I told my parents that I want to stop working. So I stopped working, and then I started to follow a training. And today, I have finished my formal education, and I am trying to be an advocate for the youth, and I'm trying also to teach other children. I'm transferring to them my knowledge, and I also work within the camps, refugee camps. In my name and on behalf of all working child, I would like to say that we have to work hand in hand so that we can really give our contribution to this cause. I would like to submit this message online through this platform, and I will do it by singing. It's a song about hope, saying that I have the right to education, I have the right to live in peace, I have the right to eat. Don't forget that I am a human being as well. Don't forget that I am a person, a human being. I would like to thank the ILO, I would like to thank UNICEF, all the organizations and participants, and first and foremost, thank you for Lebanon.
Rav, that was so beautiful. I loved hearing the interpreter interpret the song as you were singing. That was wonderful. I want to bring in Anushe Carver. She's chair of the Alliance 8.7, the Global Partnership for Eradicating Forced Labor, Modern Slavery, Human Trafficking and Child Labor around the world. Anusha, I'm going to give you a very difficult challenge because we have to get to a finale. So I'm going to ask you to be brief and succinct and yet still powerful. Anushe, Rahaf, Anushe, take it away, Rahaf.
What are the plans and policies that you will adopt in the future? And would you involve children like me in those plans, especially in light of the Convention on the Rights of the Child?
Anushe, I think you may be muted. All right, fantastic. Now we hear the voice of Anushe as well as the vision of Anushe. Go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Rahaf, pour votre expérience et votre histoire.
Thank you very much indeed for sharing your experience, your story with us. And it was wonderful to hear from everyone, Raphael, Andrea, Kumar, and you. You've really put a face on what we're talking about. I'm hearing myself here. There's a kind of an echo loop. Okay, this is better. I was saying that you put a face on what we're talking about and you gave a voice to what we want to say. And what you have lived through yourselves is very important to us. But what's equally important is what you have done in trying to live your dreams and put your projects into practice. And listening to you singing just really embodied all of that. It was wonderful. Now, thinking about your question, you asked of how young people can be involved in work and what kind of work we are envisaging for the future. As we see it, the top priority is education. We want children to go back to school, to learn. We know how important the arts are, for instance, music. Music is a universal language. We've heard you today and you've been able to share your feelings with others through music. It's not enough for children just to learn to read and write. They have to learn to think, to express themselves, to judge situations, to open up to other people and to the world around them. And that involves not just reading and writing, but also music, singing, everything else. And it's so important that people can think through their own experience, build on it, and then go out into the world and share with us your experience and your thinking as people who have chosen to speak up, chosen to bear witness, chosen to share their experience with others. And that's really at the heart of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, to give young people choices to be committed or not to commit to a movement, choices to speak up, to bear witness or not to bear witness. But the important thing is to give young people the choice, that no child should be doomed to labour, that they can make choices. And you inspire us, you give us hope for the future. You, Kumar, Raphael and Andrea, you've got out of labour, and you give us hope for what can be done. So what is our alliance? We work with victims of forced labour, of bonded labour, of enslaved labour, and we work together. International organisations, social partners, civil society, NGOs. You talked about a particular NGO helping you to get back to school. We bring NGOs on board, also enterprise networks, countries, governments, and we all work together. And in some groundbreaking countries like Madagascar, as we have heard earlier, we're able to bring all these forces together so they can pool their strengths. And what do they then do? They actually do something. They take action to put an end to child labour. You talked about helping your parents to get out of poverty. That was the first step. And that is the first step for so many families all over the world, that households need to have a decent income so that their children can go to school. Then you also asked how you can work with us in moving forward. Since the very beginning of this discussion here this afternoon, we have heard that a lot of things have been tried, but what we now need is to find something new. We need to innovate. Our Alliance 87 is not here just to keep doing what we've done in the past, but to find innovative solutions, new solutions. The statistics are bad. They eloquently show that we have to do something new because what we've done thus far hasn't worked. So I would say to you, activists, people who are now speaking up for children involved in child labour, I would say to you that we want to hear what kind of innovations you have, what innovative solutions you would like to suggest. We're actually going to organise a competition where we want to get all of these new proposals. We'll look at them, and I'm sure that you have it in you to win our competition. I'm sure you can come up with bold, brave, innovative proposals that can really take us forward and break the codes that we're all having still to live with today. And I really hope that in the future, when we come back to look at the figures, we won't be ashamed of them as we are today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Anushe, Rahav, all of our youth advocates and all of the speakers, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. So I promised you a finale, and we have a great one. JM International and the ILO got together for the very first Music Against Child Labour competition. You are about to hear from the winners of 2 of the categories. I'm going to hand over to our celebrity judges.
The world is facing an extraordinary crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is now more important than ever before to protect the most vulnerable in our society. Millions of children, some as young as 5 years old, are toiling away long hours. Their health and development is in peril. We must do more to protect children, ensuring that girls and boys everywhere have access to education.
The power of music lies in its ability to make people feel certain emotions, to connect and to bring us together.
La música ayuda a los niños a ser mejores en el colegio.
Music helps children to feel happier in their families, gives them values and builds their self-esteem and keeps them out of child labor. And while we may speak in many different tongues, music is a universal language that unites us all. For this competition, we received more than 200 entries from artists in more than 50 countries.
Participation is a testament to the fact that despite our diverse values and cultures, we stand together against child labor. 2021 is the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. This is a loud call for a better and brighter future for the world's children.
It is time now to announce the winners of the Music Against Child Labor competition. They are
In the virtual room, I feel you standing up. You are clicking your fingers. You are applauding. Congratulations to MCAZ student band from Zimbabwe and from Burkina Faso, Bernice Petripa. And now, of course, we have to hear from the winners. Bernice, the mic is yours.
Bonjour, je suis Bernice Petripa.
Hello, I'm Bernice Petripa. I'm from Burkina Faso. I'm delighted to take part in this project to fight child labour. I thank JM International, the International Labour Organization, all the musicians, and the Clear Cotton Project. Thank you.
Donnez-moi ma place. Je ne veux pas grandir avant l'âge. Donnez-moi ma place. Je ne veux pas grandir avant l'âge. Tous les jours je suis au champ, sous le soleil, comme les autres de 8 ans, mais je vis pas pareil. Le coton m'éblouit, la verdure est pleine de soucis. Je suis un enfant, j'ai plein de rêves. Je veux être comme le président, l'école fera de moi le prochain. Je veux tout apprendre du monde et venir en aide à mes prochains. Papa, donne-moi la chance, je serai ta meilleure semence. Maman, tu pries pour moi, que s'éloigne de moi la malchance. Pas qu'aussi, aïe, baba, pas qu'aussi, pas qu'aussi, aïe, maman, pas qu'aussi. Mamie, faut biga, faut ya mambaba, faut sans manges, mamie. Ma place est à l'école et pas dans les champs, non, 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 non. Ma place est à l'école et pas dans les champs, non, 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 non. Je veux aussi danser, je veux aussi m'amuser. Je veux aussi danser, je veux aussi m'amuser.
Bernice in Burkina Faso. Thank you, Bernice. Thank you to the band. The ILO-JM International Music Against Child Labour Competition Grassroots Award winners are going to play next. We're going to Zimbabwe. Hello, Zimbabwe.
Hello everyone, I'm super excited to present to you the Music Crossroads Academy Zimbabwe student band. We're going to perform a song entitled Vana Ava, and this song is addressing issues pertaining to child labor. We're saying no to child labor. Special thanks to JM International, International Labour Organization, International Federation of Musicians, and the Clear Cotton Project. Enjoy.
Anashishikana pamoyo, anakana mufaro, anasurukirwa nekushaya tariro, chero musuwo wechikora hauzivi, anomanikidzwa kushanda mabasa akaomarara, asina nezera rake.
Anashishikana pamoyo, anamparo, chero pamsuwo wechikoro, hapana wanoziva, anomanikidzwa kushanda, kuita maricho.
Thank you for the music. The World Day Against Child Labour is actually on June the 12th. I want to thank you so much for being part of today's event, brought to you by the ILO and UNICEF. There are so many more events for you to take a look at. Let me tell you what the URL will be to take part in other events to mark World Day Against Child Labour. ILO.org/Child Labour World Day. So ILO.org/Child Labour World Day. Thank you for being part of this event. Appreciate you. Take care, everybody.